The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Welcome to Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz along with my guest co-host Dan Rylance. Of course, as you're very aware, my regular co-host Tony Palmieri is seeking a seat on the Oshkosh Common Council this time around, so Dan has been filling his shoes and filling his chair for the last several weeks, and we're pleased to have you here.
Glad to be here, Cheryl. Thank you.
On this edition, we're going to be talking to the two remaining candidates for school board, Theresa Thiel and Monte, and in the second half of this half hour, we'll be talking to the remaining two candidates for the Oshkosh Common Council, Cornell and Meredith Scheuermann. The election, as I think most people know, is coming up on Tuesday, April 3rd. For school board, you can vote for up to 2 candidates. For city council, up to 3 candidates, and of course there's the mayoral election too. So that being said, welcome to both Theresa and Michelle, and congratulations on winning the primary.
Thank you.
Things, of course, since then have been even more hectic for both of you, so we appreciate your being here tonight. Let's start off with the biggie. And it has to do with the school facilities plan. Of course, a new scenario number 7 was discussed at length at the March 14th school board meeting, and we're taping this one night after that. Clearly the public is not in favor of this at all. I mean, there were, I think before the camera started rolling, you guys were saying 100 and some people were there last night, and most of them spoke out against this scenario. You know, the scenario, for those of you watching, would involve closing 6 elementary schools, realigning class divisions within the middle school. It would also require a $45.6 million referendum, or I should say up to that amount, and that would come on the ballot sometime in the next school year. So I know prior to the school board meeting last night, you each had some concerns about the plan, but now having heard the public's great opposition, where do you both stand? Either one,
okay.
I don't care.
Well, first of all, I think only about 30 people spoke, so you can't be sure what the people who weren't speaking think. Again, we have 60,000 people here, so clearly the people that were there were not happy. I guess I was still a little surprised that there didn't seem to be a lot of people opposed to the grade configuration, which I thought was the hugest thing, the big philosophical shift. It seemed to be the balancing the high schools. So as far as the grade configurations, I was initially, my gut feeling was just like, no, don't like it at all. As I listened to more of the presentation, there are some positives to it. I mean, the 1,000 more SAGE students to me is a huge positive for the district. I still would like to see how is this really going to play out in our middle schools. How much are we going to maintain the 4th and 5th graders, and ideally I would like to see if the 6th graders are brought more to the 4th and 5th grader kind, and maybe they're in a transition phase as opposed to just being that whole middle school thing. That would be appealing to me. As far as what to do with balancing the enrollments, I think the first thing you do is you don't, I mean the open enrollment thing I think makes sense to just stop the open enrollment because that's causing some issue. And then I would think that the policy should not actually move anybody until you actually know that, because right now it doesn't make sense to move them when there isn't really room either place. You know, you're not going to move 100 kids into a school that's pretty much at capacity anyway. So until you see that disparity at perhaps, you know, when one's going to be at 99% and one's going to be at 80%, then you should probably, that's when it should trigger. And where they should come from, I mean, no one's going to be happy if it's their child that's going somewhere. I don't really think it makes a whole lot of sense to bus kids that can walk.
Okay.
I don't think that makes sense.
Okay. Michelle, what are your thoughts?
I've had the fortunate experience of being invited to several PTO meetings, other public meetings in the community. Other than school board members, I have heard exactly 3 compliments to this plan, to this scenario, that it was a good plan, that the person was satisfied with most of it, that it would work for their family. 3 out of, I don't know how many, hundreds of people that I've heard and listened to and talked to. And all of my concerns from before this meeting are still there. If we're going, this is supposed to be a long-range facilities plan. If we're going to address academics, then shouldn't we be looking at our area of academics that has problems? For instance, 9th grade has a high failure rate. So instead of moving the 4th and 5th grade up into the middle school, why aren't we exploring the possibility of moving the 9th grade back down, which would alleviate some of the problems with crowding in North and West? And we may not have to cherry pick students out of the furthest southwest side of town and bus them to Reed, Maryland North. I think there is a better compromise. I think we've got to start. We've at least opened the door to alternative ideas and looking outside the box, and the potential is there. But I don't think we've got it yet, and I think there's another compromise that would be better for this community if the board's willing to take the time to explore it. And I don't mean a year, I mean a month or 2. It took the CRT and the ASC and the scenario builders months to come up with 1 year that the board approved. And now we're going to ram 9 years through in a matter of weeks. That doesn't make sense to me. Too many mistakes have happened along the way that tells me we need to slow down, we need to take careful consideration, or we're going to be right back where we started a few years ago when we were exploring all of these possibilities. We're going to be right back at that point.
Okay. And by the way, you know, unlike the candidates forum, you two can talk to each other. You can challenge each other. Just we have no boxing gloves here, so try to keep it, you know.
Well, I was going to say that we have 200 excess seats in our middle schools as they stand now. There's no way you can send all the 9th graders to our middle schools without adding on all over or getting, like 6th grade would make the most sense, out of there. Now where you're going to put them, I don't know. The reason you can do the 4-5 configuration is because you're taking those elementary buildings and converting them. But with 200 seats, I mean, West certainly has more than 200 alone, and as does North. So there's no way with the buildings we have, we can just put all the 9th graders in our middle schools. There's no seats.
So do we need to tweak, you know, maybe go back and revisit one of the other scenarios and tweak it? Do we come up with a whole new scenario? What's the answer here?
I believe we have to close the schools, and I think the schools that have been picked for the reasons that they're not going to last 25, 30 years. I mean, the average life of a well-maintained school building is 85 to 100 years. We've got buildings that are 85, you know, Roosevelt's 84 years old. I just don't think it makes fiscal sense to put money into a building like that. I think we have to, if we're never gonna close schools and we're gonna keep that status quo, we're never gonna have $1 saved in operating costs. And everyone keeps focusing on the operating costs. Whoa, it's only 1.5 million. True. However, if you get rid of 6 buildings, you're not spending anything to repair them either. That's a figure. And you're not spending for the next 20 years over the course of the bond. And I've asked for those figures. I mean, I asked for them last night, so I don't have them. But over what would we have to spend on those 6 buildings over the course of the bond? I mean, those are also savings to the budget, and those also offset the cost of building. Again, I would not suggest going to referendum with one question for $45 million either. But I think we have to start closing schools, and we have to have the will. I mean, I've watched it again and again. People get upset, and then we don't do it. And here we're left with 16 elementary buildings yet again. We haven't closed a building. We've just sent Sunset to Reed, which makes sense. Because, again, just look at that. Just as doing that, we've saved 2 to 3 teaching positions. Over $100,000 just by doing that little thing. I think we have to get a handle on the buildings.
Okay. Michelle?
I think not only are we closing too many buildings, I think we're targeting the wrong buildings. If we're going to say we're closing this building because it's not worth putting money into, then we have to look at the numbers that were generated by Sodexo in the FCAP, as well as the numbers that have been provided by PMP and the architects and everyone else doing research in the district, which does not hold true that those 6 are the bottom of the barrel, either operationally per square footage, or the cost to bring those buildings up to some kind of standard. And I think at this point the standard's unrealistic. We're comparing these schools to Jefferson and Traeger, which are 10 or less years old. Everything looks good when you're in Jefferson and Traeger. And when you go to any of the other schools, they're all going to look worn out, they're all going to look rough, they're all going to look lived in. That doesn't mean their life expectancy is over. When I looked through the numbers and through the FCAP, Roosevelt's building, compared to the replacement cost of that building, the replacement value of that building, the maintenance and the deferred maintenance and everything to bring it up to ADA, it doesn't mesh as being an expensive building. When I played with the numbers and put the schools and ranked them by all different criteria, from the FCAT to the operational expenditures, the 6 schools at the bottom, Washington was at the bottom. 4 out of 6 categories. Washington was at the bottom. E. Cook was in that, Shapiro was in that, Franklin was in that, Oak Lawn and Lakeside. Those were the 6 at the bottom. Operationally, efficiency-wise, if we're going to say we're closing schools because they cost too much, we should be able to back that up. And when the numbers back up other options, I don't buy it. I don't think we've built enough growth into the remaining buildings that they have in this plan. We're closing buildings, yet we're building over 100 classrooms. That makes no sense to me. Why do you reinvent the wheel if you have buildings that are geographically better positioned? If we close Roosevelt and Oak Lawn and put all of those kids into Franklin and Reed, and there's development on the northwest side, which has been predicted, Shelley Muse already said Reed cannot handle that amount of growth. So what do? Well, we mothballed Roosevelt, we mothballed Oak Lawn, possibly sold them. What do you know? We're going to have to build a whole new school, go back to the community for another referendum when we had buildings that were being successful.
Are you in favor of a vote on this in 2 weeks? Or do you think the vote on this should wait until after?
I don't think they plan to vote on it. It sounded to me like they were going to workshop it again.
They were going to workshop it. So you won't see it before after the new board members are seated then?
That's on if they decide to vote on it April 4th, then it would still be the old board. Yeah. But I do think it's a little too quick. I don't see the point in hurrying to that because there is still a lot of questions. But I do think we have to do something, and I think you have to look at more than just what does it cost to fix this. What is the lifespan of the expected lifespan of the building as well, and where is it located? And I personally have been through Oak Lawn numerous times, and I'm only speaking about the building. Yeah. I wouldn't put another dollar in there. It has so many issues. They don't even have a computer lab because they don't have room. Their storage closets are shaped like triangles so that you can't even put a box in there. I just don't think it makes fiscal sense to put money in a building like that.
You mentioned earlier, Theresa, about 1,000 more kids that would be eligible for SAGE. Mm-hmm. Could you tell our viewers and give us a brief definition of what a SAGE program is?
SAGE stands for Student Guarantee in Education. What it does is it limits the ratio of teacher to student to 1 to 15, 1 teacher for 15 students. It can go up as high as 18, but they try to keep it below 15. Also, along with that is they're required to have lighted schoolhouses. I think a lot of people are familiar with Webster Stanley's, where the school buildings are open beyond the regular school day. For every child who qualifies for free or reduced lunch, currently the state gives the district $2,000 for each of those students. Okay. They're talking about raising it. Who knows if it will go up or not. It's been at the $2,000 figure since it came into place. But it lowers that ratio so that teachers have a better ability. And then there's also, teachers are required to write goals for their students at least every semester. They have more intensive professional development, et cetera. I mean, they're really expected to bring the students up. They have very high expectations, and as Mrs. Vickman explained last night, there have been great success. I mean, they have seen and documented great success within Oshkosh through this program. You
both would agree that SAGE is a good program?
Without a doubt.
Yeah. But how do you are there that many kids in is it grades 1 through 3 or
Yes,
K through
K3.
K3, okay, that qualify economically?
Yeah, there is no qualification. Now, Sage is, you can't open any more Sage schools in the state. They've cut that off. When it first started, there was a qualification. You had to have a certain percentage. Then they opened it up for 2 or 3 years to anybody who wanted to. But economically, for a district, you need to have around that 40, the figure I heard was somewhere around 40% for it to completely pay for itself. That if 40% of your students qualify for a free or reduced lunch, the money you get from Sage pays for the teachers and the development and things like that.
Who's going to pay for the additional Sage students? The state?
The state gives you the $2,000, and according to what the district numbers they're putting out, I think there's something like I think they'd get an additional $500-some thousand, which would pay for the additional teachers they need to lower that class size from 22 to 15.
Okay. So you see that as both of it as a plus, that you would have more elementary kids in Sage in the school district? You're kind of smiling at me.
Without a doubt, Sage is an incredible program.
Okay.
The two things that concern me, one is there's no guarantee that funding is going to continue. And as we've seen in the media, Governor Doyle's budget is in a little bit of trouble. He has a lot of initiatives there and a lot of great ideas, but not enough money to spread over everybody. The other problem I have, it's not really a problem, it's just more of a question. Should our goal be to make this a huge Sage population? We're talking about 7 elementary schools, 5 would be Sage. 70% of our K3s would be served with Sage, which is wonderful. But how many of those kids need that? Without a doubt, Sage would raise the achievement level of just about any student who's in a Sage classroom. This low student-teacher ratio is extraordinary. However, not every child really needs that amount of one-on-one. Some children do better with less attention. Some students do better on their own. And we don't know for a fact that their achievement level would not be high no matter what classroom they're in. We're guessing. And we're guessing on the side of caution, but in the end, it may end up costing us a great deal, both with losing our neighborhood schools, with losing our continuity within our community, with creating more divisiveness, the referendum dollars, having to build additional classrooms. There's just so many other things that perk of having 70% of the K3 in Sage doesn't balance with me. It's not enough.
Fair.
There's a wealth of research. I mean, it came out of the STAR program in Tennessee, where they tracked students from kindergarten all the way post-high school, and they found that those benefits last well beyond. And in Tennessee, they just randomly assigned, and all they did is lower class sizes. Theirs was 1 to 17. Random assignment, you go with 22 teachers and an aide, all of that. It's not done very often in education, and the results are very powerful, that it does make a huge difference. And I think that was the one thing that came out of all of the focus groups with PMP, keep those class sizes low. So I think that is really addressing that. That was all across, that was really a priority for people.
In fairness to Michelle, 3 of the board members last night who really didn't say they would vote for it. There are 3 that are eager to go. But the other 3 have a lot of questions about Sage. Mr. Schneider, Mr. McDermott, and I think even Mr. Trask said, we want the administration to come back and rework these figures. I think they are concerned about cost, as you mentioned, but that seems to be a big question for at least 3 of the board members.
Well, and I think you need to say, I mean, you can't just say, oh, well, we have to build 110 classrooms because of Sage. I mean, how many classrooms would we build with it, and how many would we have to build without it?
Okay.
So it's how many more classrooms do we need because of Sage, not how many classrooms, not that we're building every classroom because of Sage, because in some instances, for example, if you close Smith and put them in Jefferson, you'd have to add classrooms to Jefferson. There's not enough room for 180 regular ed students to fit. So you're going to have to build classrooms. Do you have to build more because of it?
Okay. If a referendum fails, then what? What do you do?
Well, again, I would suggest you go to referendum with a 2-question question. Number 1 being, okay, we've closed these schools, which is what some in the community are saying. You got to close schools, you got to be more efficient. So we've closed these schools. We've put students everywhere we can with our existing seats. How many more seats do we, how many more classrooms do we absolutely have to build to fit these people? And what is it going to cost to bring our remaining buildings up to code, not up to code, but take care of all that deferred maintenance. What's that going to be? That's question number one. Then question number two is, and this is what it's going to cost to bring equity, to bring so that everybody has a gym at an elementary school, so that everybody has an art room, so that you don't have the open concepts anymore. And that's your question number two. And then does the community want to do that? Because I don't want to go to referendum with 45 million, it fails, and we haven't done a thing with those buildings that we have to maintain. And we know we're behind on maintenance. So I think you have to have your number one question be, this is absolutely, here's the savings you asked for, this is what we have to do to make those savings happen, and this is what it's going to cost to bring our buildings to where they should be.
Okay, I'm going to give Michelle a chance to answer that, but I want to touch on something real quickly. And I know we're running short on time here too, so I don't want to sound like the League of Women Voters Forum, but if we can kind of tighten up our answers a little, that way we can get to a few more things. You had said that there are some buildings that you wouldn't stick another penny into, and you have served on the board before. Now, some of the complaints that I think we've all been hearing in the community is, this is a result of past boards on which you did serve. How would you respond to that?
I don't think it was, I think it goes way, way back to when boards decided, okay, we have a choice between a program cut and not maintaining our building. We're not going to put, yes, it's true, even when I was on the board, we don't have $3 million to put in our buildings, and we need to put that into our buildings. The referendums put a little bit and gave us some catch up with some buildings. It's not there, it's not going to be there. And if we don't close any schools, we're not going to have another dollar to put into anymore. We don't have it. We're cutting 1.8 million. Where are we going to get 3?
So you're saying it would have happened no matter who was on the board? Is that?
I went back and did research. I never voted against anything that our experts, that our buildings and grounds director brought us and said, this is what we have to do. I didn't vote no.
Okay. Michelle, a referendum fails. What do we do?
Actually, at this point in time, we, as in the district, don't have a backup plan. If the referendum fails, the CRT was told by Dr. Heilman that we'll ask the community what was wrong with it, we'll try and fix it, and then we'll just keep coming back until we get it right. I think in the meantime, the fact of the matter is we have not gotten through to the community. We haven't made enough attempts to explain this. Most people, and I think I can safely say this, most people in Oshkosh have no idea what Scenario 7 is. But we're going to vote on it, and then we're going to hit them with a $45.6 million referendum next April. I think a solid case should be made before a vote. And then you spend between now and the referendum helping people to understand and explaining where the transitions are going to be. And this is how we're going to make better what you currently have. You have a great school, we're going to do one better for you. We need to get the community involved and explain that what's coming is better than what they've got. Unfortunately, what's on the table right now really doesn't seem better than what we've got.
Okay. Go ahead.
At the League of Women Voters Forum, you were both asked, where you might cut from the budget, because if you get on the board, you got to cut. You came forth, I thought, with a lot of programs, and I thought, Theresa, you said you didn't want to get into cutting.
No, I said I couldn't identify, and some of the things that Michelle did identify, you can't save $90,000 twice. It's already taken out of that budget. So I couldn't find $160,000 to not do fees, and I don't know today where the $500,000 is going to come from that isn't going to hurt kids and affect programs, because we're in the bottom 10% of spending in the state. There's, you can't get blood from a turnip, and a lot of those savings, if you fire Sodexo, you can't save $250,000 because you have to have, unless you're not going to have a buildings and grounds director, and each custodian is going to maintain the buildings and decide. When we had a buildings and grounds director, we also paid for consultants. So that has to be factored in.
Okay. Response?
We have Sodexo and we're still paying for consultants, so what difference does it make? We may not save the whole $250,000 from getting rid of Sodexo. We certainly could save at least $125,000 by hiring a qualified building and grounds director. We are instead farming out our custodial and maintenance jobs to contractors, which have a high turnover rate. We don't know the degree of their background checks. They don't know our buildings. They don't have the CPR and AED certification our custodians and maintenance have. They don't. We're going to see people coming and going, and we're trying to improve security in our buildings. Our custodians and our maintenance people have relationships with the teachers and the students, and when they walk in a building, everybody knows who they are. If a contractor walks in the building, unless they've got their name on their shirt, nobody knows who they are. That concerns me as a parent, that anybody can just walk in, because some of the doors are a little further away from the office and they're not going to get caught right away. I think that there are, yes, I looked at some programs, for instance, driver's education. You look around the state, most schools do not have driver's education anymore. It's gone private simply because it takes up classroom space. There's a lot of expensive equipment with the simulators. We do lease the cars, but I think giving them back is going to save us money. We don't have to lease them anymore. You're talking about the time it takes those instructors. We have to pay those instructors. There's a lot of things in that program. I would have loved to have had driver's ed when I was in high school, but my school decided that academics was more important than driver's ed. So that sacrifice was made. If we're going to stop cutting essential student programs, like the various at-risk programs that don't exist anymore, we need to look at the non-essentials.
Well, we do charge $140, and
Yeah,
someone told me it's
per
going
student,
up,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I don't know what the actual savings would be versus the fees.
Okay. Michelle, we've heard comments from both you and Mr. Becker about being able to do 100% of the work, and we're running out of time here, so let me just get this out. What exactly do you mean by that?
It's a complicated situation because Mrs. Thiel, while very diligent, she's been to the board meetings, she has a lot of knowledge, she has experience. While she has all of those positive qualities, her husband's a teacher, which means that when contracts are under negotiation, she can't vote on the budget. She can vote on the budget reconciliation plan, but if we did the budget right, we wouldn't need the reconciliation plan. And because she works for CISA, there's even more limitations. And as a taxpayer, that bothers me.
Actually,
because
there's not with CISA.
Regardless, as a taxpayer, it bothers me if my tax dollars are going to pay someone to do a job. I would hope I'm getting my money's worth. And if they have to continuously abstain from votes, I don't feel that I am.
Okay.
Can I just say that when I was on the board, I cast 479 votes. That's a 96% voting record. So 4% of the time I couldn't.
But you cashed 100% of the checks.
Oh,
That's
okay.
my point. It's
all right.
a balance thing.
But sooner or later in someone's political career, I mean, should that really be a reason that someone shouldn't be elected? Because sooner or later, someone has to abstain for whatever reason, or they miss a meeting. So if you were elected and you missed a meeting for an illness or professional or other personal reason, would you then resign from the board because you're no longer able to do 100% of the job?
Oh, I never said Mrs. Thiel shouldn't be elected.
I think that was a very clear point at the candidates forum, is that you and Dan can both do 100% of the work.
That's just one quality that we have over Mrs. Thiel. And you know what? It doesn't matter because clearly in the primary, other people feel that Mrs. Thiel is more than adequate for the job. I'm not going to tell people who they should and shouldn't vote for. I personally, that's my opinion. I will vote for the person that can do the entire job because that is a paid position. And you know what? Board members have sick days, board members have babies, board members go on vacations. It is a part-time job. But when you're sitting at the table at every meeting and it comes to a vote and you are sitting there and you can't, it's hard to reconcile that. Mm-hmm. As a taxpayer, it's hard to reconcile that. I'm sure Mrs. Thiel can make up for it in other ways. I don't know what they are, but...
Okay. All right. We're out of time. Thanks to both of you. I wish we had more time, but we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Bob Cornell and Meredith Scheuermann. We'll be right back.
We just escaped.
I escaped.
I escaped.
By foot.
And run across the border.
I couldn't practice my religion.
I was put to work in forced labor camps.
If I stay in Cambodia, I would have been dead by now.
If you think differently, then you're an enemy.
If you know how to read and write, you're dead. You speak your mind? Your dad?
The only way to express what I wanted to do was to get out.
I got to the country when I was about 14 years old.
I was 20.
I was 24.
I came here with nothing. No money, no English.
America stood for freedom, it stands for freedom, and that's what all my generation, young generation, wanted to be there.
For the first time, I felt like I have a right to be on this earth.
Here, you can do whatever you want to do.
I love my life here. I feel at home.
I'm free to do what I want.
Freedom to me means my life.
How you doing?
Hi.
Hi.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Thanks.
If only child abuse were this easy to recognize. If you even suspect abuse, call 1-800-4-A-CHILD. All calls are anonymous and confidential. Trust your instincts.
Poor nutrition today will increase Sarah's chances of anemia, add to her healthcare costs, sick days, even stunt her ability to learn. And the thing is, Sarah's not even born yet. Get proper nutrition before it's too late. Call or visit WIC. WIC provides nutrition information, healthcare referrals, even food. Your child has you, and you have WIC.
What?
And welcome back to the second half of Eye on Oshkosh. We're joined now by Bob Cornell and Meredith Scheuermann. As I said at the outset of the program, the election's coming up on Tuesday, April 3rd. You can vote for up to three city council people, and each of these guests this evening is hoping that one of your votes will go toward them. So, Meredith, of course, is seeking her second term. She is currently in her first term, and Bob is trying this for the very first time ever, and so we want to congratulate both of you on your success in the primary, and thank you both for being here. And Meredith, you are terribly sick, so we'll try not to make you talk a lot, but you're going to have to talk.
Okay, will do.
We got lots of questions.
Have to take it easier on it.
Let's just jump right into the very first thing that I think is on people's lips right now. We're taping this on the 15th rather of March. At the March 13th Common Council meeting, the Council authorized $2.7 million in public financing to finally do something with the old Mercy Medical Center. And that's something that developer Ben Ganther was going to do. He failed to make good on that. The party now involved in the development is Community Retirement Living, better known as CRL. And as it turns out, since your vote Tuesday night, we have now learned that Mr. Dan Anbar, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, the managing partner for CRL, was a partner with Mr. Ganther in a 2002 proposal to renovate Mercy, and he was one of two signers of a development agreement in March of 2003. With Ganther in this project. Now, that information was not given to the Common Council. I understand that it was probably out there in the public forum somewhere, but clearly it wasn't brought to the Council's attention before you all voted on it Tuesday night. City Manager Dick Wolink wasn't aware of it, so even though it was out in the public forum somewhere, it was years ago and people didn't remember it. I think that Mr. Jackson Kinney had a responsibility to let you all know that. And as a member who voted on that, I'd like to know how you feel about that. And then, Bob, I'd like to know how you feel about the situation as a whole and not disclosing that information.
When I asked Mr. Kinney about it, it appeared to me to be just a total, I didn't think it was important. I don't think for a second that he was covertly trying to withhold any information from us. In fact, he reminded me that Paul, Shirley, and Bill were at the council were on the council in 2002, and they voted in support of that development agreement then. So they certainly were there and were aware. Maybe weren't aware of it. Had probably forgotten about it. So I mean, he was, I would call it dumbfounded that this really was an issue. I really don't think that it was something that they purposely withheld. And at the end of the day, for me, he had a 5% interest in a project 5+ years ago that within, I think it was 15 months, he got out of. It wouldn't have made a difference if something that he did 5 years ago that he recognized the project wasn't going the way he wanted to, and he got out. So even if that information would have been released to us, I don't think it would have made a difference on my vote.
But he still does have a relationship with Ben Ganther. Ganther is still going to be involved in the design and construction of this project, even though he continues to be in arrears on some of his taxes.
And see, I almost flip that, because I almost say, well, that's good. Give the guy some business so we can pay our taxes that he owes.
Oh, come on. He's got all kinds of business, Meredith, and he doesn't pay his taxes.
That's irresponsible. Absolutely. It is irresponsible not to pay your taxes, but when I sit on city council, I don't determine, is it a good idea, who's going to do the design work and the general contractor for the project. That's not a decision that I make.
All right, Bob?
Well, I was impressed with the presentation, and obviously I had a chance to read everything over ahead of time, you know, as we get the same packet the council does, and I was very excited about the project. But after all was said and done, and I would have voted the same way. I would have voted to definitely go ahead with the project because it is an eyesore and something needs to be done. Hearing the news, and I heard it the day after, I feel just the opposite of Meredith does. Was it withheld intentionally? Obviously, I don't have that answer. But should it have been withheld? Absolutely not. It's part of the package. Now, even knowing it's part of the package, it would have put a different light on some of the questions that the council asked both Jackson and the other individual. And, okay, it might have come to light that, fine, the project is still a viable one and it should go ahead. And then the vote would have been the same way. But the fact that it wasn't laid on the table, this is one of the problems I have when I talk about the city marketing itself. Everything's got to be on the table. Everything's got to be in the open, as far as I'm concerned.
This is going to be coming back because Paul Esslinger intends to bring it back for reconsideration. Brian Bain has something on his website this afternoon talking about his displeasure with the fact that it wasn't shared with the council, with City Manager Dick Wallach, with the community at large. When it comes back for reconsideration, it'll probably come back before the new council is seated, so it will affect you, certainly. What, if anything, is going to be your participation in that reconsideration?
The reconsideration of the vote is based on us now knowing that the developer had a relationship 6 years ago of 5% ownership in a project. I mean, if there was other information that was not disclosed, more pertinent information, something that happened last year or 2 years ago, I mean, I would really be more concerned about it. But for me, it's like 6 years ago, he had a 5% ownership in that project. 5%. It doesn't seem, that piece doesn't seem significant. I don't like the fact that it wasn't there. I'm not going to say, oh, it's no big deal. But that's not enough to bring it back and reconsider votes over.
I have I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Just say a few words on that also.
Absolutely. Sure.
I think the bigger problem is, and I have no problem with the individual, and I think that the project's going to turn out fine. The thing that concerns me the most is the city manager admitted he didn't know it. Now, he's running the show, and that department comes under his leadership. If he doesn't know, that's the problem I think that a lot of people see of what's happening right now. If the boss doesn't know, you have a real problem.
Paul didn't remember, and Bill didn't remember, and Shirley didn't remember. I mean, it was a 5%. I mean, I don't know what the presentation in 2002 looked like, but obviously a lot of people didn't remember. It really couldn't be that exciting. I don't know.
Well, so then I guess, the question is, if it wasn't that big of a deal, why did Mr. Kinney not mention it, just to kind of refresh people's memory, especially since one of the things that was voted on, it was resolution 0788. It has Ben Ganther's name in it as far as repaying money for, let's see here, a proof reimbursement agreement in the event something does not work out here. It's for legal and financial advisory services. So especially since they were both tied into this, why would Jackson not just mention it?
I don't know.
But that doesn't concern you?
Yeah, you know, I would have liked it to have been there, but was it an oversight? Was it? I don't think it was intentional. Should he have done it? Sure. That's what I said in the paper. Sure, it would have been nice to know that.
How would either of you support Mr. Walling then formally disciplining Jackson Kinney for once again not letting the council know something pertinent like this?
My position is that any department head that does not follow the direction of what the ship is supposed to be going through the leadership of the city manager should be disciplined at any time, not just Jackson Kinney, but any department head. It's up to Richard to set the pace. It's up to the council to tell him what they want. Then it's up to him to say, this is my program, this is my mission. Now, I'm hiring department heads who are going to fulfill this mission. If they don't, there has to be discipline involved. Otherwise, what's the sense of having the structure that you have?
Mm-hmm.
So should he be disciplined? Should it be brought to his attention? Should something be done? In my mind, yes, definitely.
So you're saying it's time for Mr. Walling
It's
to run
time,
a
it's time to
tighter
stand
ship.
up and be counted.
Okay, Meredith?
I'd say similar things. I mean, and you know, and quite honestly, we don't know if Mr. Kinney's been called on the carpet on this yet, because that stuff isn't in public record for us to know. I'm quite sure that Mr. Kinney was talked to about this. I mean, I can just tell from the pulse of it. As far as be terminated over it, doesn't feel like a terminatable offense to me.
I don't think anyone said termination.
Yeah.
Oh, there's been people who've certainly called for his resignation.
Well, not at this table.
Oh,
I mean.
no. But
No.
I mean, people have said enough's enough. He's got to go. I mean, they've clearly said some things like that. And, you know, in my mind, it doesn't appear to be a terminatable offense, but I'm quite sure that they've had some conversation about it.
Well, I would hope so.
Yeah. A sidebar, Tuesday night I spoke at the Citizens Comment, and I urged any council members who had received a campaign contribution from Ben Ganther to admit that or acknowledge that for public disclosure. And we had an exchange last night after the Winnebago County Democratic Party. And rather than for me to repeat what you said, maybe you could repeat what you told me at that meeting.
That I did not receive a contribution from Ben Ganther this time for any kind of support or financial means or anything.
Okay. But you had received contributions in the past.
Oh, sure. 2 years ago I did.
Okay. That's not valid for at least acknowledging that you have been a recipient of his campaign contributions in the past?
2 years ago?
Yeah.
It's public record. Certainly don't think something like that's got to be.
Okay. But people would not know that. Well, they don't go down and look at.
Well, certainly people do. The newspaper posts it every cycle and things like that. But I mean, I can't remember, but I mean, I received I raised the most money out of everybody. I raised tons of money, and if I had to recuse myself or even make knowledge of every time something came close, you know, to somebody giving me money, I'd be talking about it all the time.
Okay. But he was a major donor, wasn't
he? If I remember correctly, I haven't looked, but I think he gave $100.
Okay. And he's donating nothing to your campaign this time?
He has not.
Okay.
Hasn't asked me to, doesn't have a sign. I mean, no, he's not part of it.
Don't raise so much money. Be like the rest of us and go with under 1,000.
I didn't. I think I'm going to actually be third this time, and I purposely did not. And in fact, I've been very honest about that. But purposely don't want to be the one raising the most money because it brings implications and perceptions like that. So
it's baseball season. Looking at your record, I think you had 3 strikes against you the first term. You voted for the garbage fee. You went into the closed meeting violating the law, and you voted to put the increased mill levy on the ballot for yet you say on your questionnaires that you're really a good financial person. And so I guess I'm thinking, well, she's a good financial person at raising more money for the city that 80% of the voters had rejected on both the garbage fee and the mill levy. What would be your response to that?
Couple of things. Let's go backwards. First of all, absolutely, I supported the voters to decide should we raise the tax levy. I didn't vote for it.
Let me correct you. This is what you voted on. The council hereby supports an increase in the city tax levy for 2006 to be collected in 2007 to exceed the state levy limit. You voted with 3 other people. The council hereby supports an increase. That's you. You voted for it.
Well,
and now you're telling me you go to the ballot box and you vote against what you voted at a common council meeting?
Here's what, you obviously have the document there, and that's completely fine. But it is my understanding, and it has been this entire time, that was over a year ago, I said, I think it's completely appropriate to let the voters decide.
But you voted to put it on the ballot. And you, by doing that, you also said you support the increase in the city tax levy.
You know, you can hang me on that, and that's fine.
I'm just reading what you voted on.
I can see where you are. I can certainly see where you are connecting the dots and saying that I supported that, and that's what it reads. I'm support of letting the voters decide.
Okay.
So that's, in my mind, that's exactly what I did.
Okay.
I didn't support it. I didn't support the garbage fee. I've talked about this 100 times. At the end of the day, I did support putting the garbage tax on for 3 months for the fourth quarter, and that was only after we couldn't get a fourth vote to take it off. And you know, if you were there last night, you heard Frank Tower saying he was one of the ones that he wished he would have changed his vote, and we would have never even had the garbage. But after 4 hours of debating it, if you can't get somebody to change their mind, you got to move on. So we enacted. We said, "Yep, we'll do it for fourth quarter," but we pledged to come back and get rid of it. The citizens beat us to it, which is great because I never know if I didn't support it or I did support it. I didn't want the garbage tax. I don't know if it was an affirmative vote or a negative vote. And the third thing I tell you, you bet, I went into the closed session meeting based on the legal guidance that we were given.
You know, that you're the second incumbent to say that. Bain said the same thing. Are you elected to follow what the administration tells you to do? I thought you're elected as a legislative body to challenge and make up your own opinion. But both of you say, well, we went into closed meeting because that's what the administration told us to do. It sounds like a White House thing.
They said it was okay to do it. They didn't force us to do it. I certainly made that decision to go in there and stay in there. But you do have to, this is a, he is an expert on that. I'm not an expert on that, so you have to look to him. Just like when we make decisions on purchasing garbage trucks and doing road construction, I don't know a thing about that. You have to look to the experts and say, you know, what's your opinion of that?
6 or 7 voters, constituents said, take your time, ask for an AG opinion. So the 6 or 7 people who said, take your time, don't do it, you rejected, but you went right away because he's the expert.
That's his job. He is the expert. That's his job, and that we have to rely on our. We don't go out and get separate opinions from our hired staff. Then we really wouldn't have any. That would say we don't have faith in our attorney, or not our attorney, our city attorney.
Yeah. Are you aware of the open meeting statute? What it says?
I'm much more aware of it now than I was. I mean, I can't tell you I could have recited it then.
Yeah. Okay. Am I picking on her too much, Bob?
I was wondering if I really were going to get to say something.
Absolutely. You're on.
I don't mind being in a barrel.
Yeah.
If you had to do it again, would you still do it? Because Mr. Kraft has said that he would advise you all the same way. So knowing now what you do, if you had known that then, would you do it again?
Probably not. I'm much more cautious now. And you can, people can take me all the way to the cleaners if they want. You learn in this job. You learn. You know, first year we passed a budget in November. Last year we came back and we started in July because we were, pushed against a wall and we didn't make the best decision. So we come back last year and we started 4 months earlier. That's what experience and that's what time gives you. And that's probably one of the things I've learned. I think I should be reelected for that reason alone. I mean, I've just learned 2 years of good experience. So.
I want to ask you about a rule change that probably will be made after the April 3rd election. And that rule change will be to eliminate the citizens portion of the council meetings. I'm wondering where you're at on that.
Well, unfortunately, for 2 years, I've advocated doing that. And I was chastised publicly because there's an individual who uses that venue to push his issues and wants to eliminate it. Eliminating now is not in my vocabulary. Somehow to control it would be in my vocabulary. We all know there's individuals who just abuse it and it's a waste of time. It has nothing to do with future city business or for anything that can help anyone. My position has always been if citizens have something to say, they're given the opportunity at resolutions and ordinances when they're read individually to speak their mind, and on that particular one. Now, obviously, that doesn't help them for anything that they see in the future that they might want to talk about. One of the things I would like to see is that when they're through the citizens portion and you go into the council portion and the council amends something, it should be reopened up to the citizens because they never had a chance to speak on the amendment. It might change their thinking. Where they were in agreement, they might be in agreement. So if I could do anything to promote that, I would be more than happy to do that, to give citizens a second chance at an amendment.
That's a
That's
good
a
point.
good idea.
Are you willing to stay with the citizens portion? Or?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
It does need to be controlled, and I think that the way you do that is you give somebody a warning, and I'm not talking about, I'm fine with even some of the repeat people who come up and talk about their mission. I don't have a problem with that. But when they clearly get out of line, they continuously swear and all those kind of things, they need to be warned once, they do it again, they need to be banned.
We're
I mean,
getting
it's very
close
simple.
to that, I think.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Amen.
Closer than you actually think.
Yeah.
So
No,
maybe about a week.
Yeah, yeah. I hear
Because
you.
it's not acceptable
No, it's
anymore.
not.
But
Okay.
but certainly citizens have to have the right to come and talk to us.
Yes. Okay.
We kind of beat up here on Meredith. I'm going to take a shot at you now,
Go
Bob.
for it.
You've said in a few different places on blogs and so forth that you want people to identify themselves with name, address, and phone number, I think,
Right.
when they contact you. And you don't like the anonymity. You know, sometimes people choose anonymity for a number of reasons.
Yeah, and I understand the reasons why.
Well, and sometimes they're employees.
That's
you
correct,
know,
and that's one of the major
yep,
reasons.
And so there are reasons why sometimes people want that or need that, and they fear having their name out there. What assurance can you give to the citizens that if they don't provide you with that information, that their concerns are still going to be A, listened to and not cut off, B, looked at and taken seriously?
Well, if you look into the Northwestern on the community forum, I made the statement that even though I don't like talking to anonymous people, in fact, besides asking for their name, their address, and their phone number, I have 3 other questions. Are you a registered voter? Do you vote? And do you own property and pay taxes to the city of Oshkosh? I also stated in there that the answer would not change my thinking on my response. But to me, it's important to know, because if somebody calls me and they talk to me and they follow that criteria, and I say, why didn't you vote? And they say, because it's not important, and my response is going to be, then why are you talking to me about something that you want changed if you don't care about doing anything to change it? And that's one of the reasons I like to know who I'm talking to. I realize that the future, the telephone is basically out for conversation. Everything is going to be email, internet, whatever. And I haven't, I'll be very honest, I haven't bought into that 100%, but I recognize the importance of it, and I will participate, and I'm answering people now who I have no idea who they are, and I've been getting a lot of positive responses because of my answers and willing to commit to do that after what I originally said.
Yeah, see, they're not all a bunch of cranks out there just because they don't want to tell you who they are.
Cheryl, the problem is there's too many out there that are against everything and not for anything. And I don't like to waste time with those type of situations. I don't think none of us do. And that's another reason why if somebody's willing to identify themselves, then they have a positive message as far as I'm concerned.
Jackson Kinney is going to identify himself when he calls him. Right?
Okay.
The fishing pier looks to be headed to some kind of a little hearing in front of an administrative law judge coming up in May, I believe, early part of May. The two sides met recently, couldn't resolve their differences, the two sides being, of course, the Otter Street Fishing Club and some citizens, many of whom live near where the pier is supposed to go in. Meredith, you were on the council when that vote came up, but you've also been very supportive of trying to work with the neighborhood people and the other citizens. Do both of you or either of you believe that the city has kept an open mind about this, especially since the issue was admittedly by the Parks Department director fast-tracked?
What is the question?
Do you think that the city has kept an open mind about this?
No. I think that in fact, I was told this, that it's not in the city's hands any longer because the city council approved it. So it is now in, you know, the Otter Street folks have been given the green light, but then they had to stop it because it's now in appeals.
Right.
But the city can't come back. There was none of the council members were willing to bring it back to talk about it again. So I don't think that the city has any choice.
Okay. At a minimum, I think that there are some people out there, and myself included, who think that one member of the Parks Board, Terry Wohler, who is also a member of the fishing club, should have recused himself from that vote.
Sure.
How do each of you feel about that? And if you share that feeling, what, if you're on the council, would you be willing to do to put some things in place so that something like this does not happen again?
Does conflict of interest pertain to voluntary board members? I don't know if the...
Yes, it does.
I mean, certainly the spirit of conflict of interest should, but is there a legal ramifications or...
Well, the city attorney comes in and talks to us
Yeah, he certainly does.
on a fairly regular basis, and we're volunteers.
Okay.
So.
So clearly that should be re-examined. I guess I thought it was more of a spirit. I would think that if you know you've got personal interest and gain in something, you can make comments about it, but you probably shouldn't be voting on it.
See, and I think that the point here was that Mr. Wohler is feeling like he doesn't have a financial interest in it, but I think that he does, because if they can't do this, they've said that the city owes them something like $10,000 for lumber or whatever. So clearly there is a financial interest there.
Sure.
Bob,
But
what
I
are your
think
thoughts?
that in anybody that sits on any of the boards or commissions, I think there should be a distinct understanding that if there is any kind of interest, self-interest, whether it's financial or not, it's your responsibility to disclose that. And then let the chair of that committee say, all right, I think your vote's going to influence this. You will not be voting. You will be excused from voting because of your involvement. But it should be disclosed, in my mind, on any commissioner.
Well, what else is very interesting is certainly the park board members knew what his position was. I mean, so Mr. Stefani could have said something, Brian Bain could have said something. Is there a chair of the Parks Board like there is every
Yes, there is.
Yes.
You know,
Sure.
I mean, clearly...
One of the 7 members.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly they had lots of opportunities to urge him, you know, maybe you should be not voting on this, and it didn't happen. But again, I think that was an error. I think that was an oversight. I don't think that there was any... Maybe I'm too forgiving to be in politics. I don't know. But I think that they've learned their lesson. Maybe they've learned their lesson, and they're not going to do that again. They've really done some things in the Parks Board to change some notification things. They've stepped some things up since then, so...
Okay. But you would each be willing to look at changing that if you're elected?
I would be.
We can, I mean, it's something that I probably can do, you know, next week. I really didn't think about it in that.
I'd be very emphatic about it, that
Yeah.
I think it should be disclosed if you're in that type of a situation.
Okay. All right. Very good. We're out of time. You're both probably relieved about
Wow.
that. But thank you very much for being here, and good luck.
Okay. Good luck to both of you.
And again, go to the polls on Tuesday, April 3rd. If by chance you don't know where to vote or you're not registered to vote, give the city clerk a call and they will be able to help you out with any of that. Thanks to the crew, thanks to all of our guests, thanks to Dan, and as always, thanks to you. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.